The issue of the rule of law has become central in the European Union over the last decade. Up until recently, the spotlight was mainly on concerns over Hungary and Poland. But now the European Commission has decided to widen its horizons and evaluate the democracy and corruption situation in all 27 member states, one by one.
My guest is Vera Jourova, the Vice President of the European Commission for Values and Transparency. You just presented the first ever rule of law report of the European Commission. How healthy is Europe's democracy?
This is an important moment. When we present the reports, it's not only just presented any report, it's not a business as usual, because we need it to make a good assessment of the situation in all the member states. We are looking at the situation in judiciary sphere, especially on the independence of judiciary, balancing the powers between the different branches. We are also newly looking at what the member states do against corruption, and also newly we are looking at the situation of media, because media are not only economic actors, but also they have a very crucial role in protecting the freedom of speech and also democracy.
What are the main findings of the report? Where do you see the most problems related to the media freedom, to the justice system and to corruption?
The main problems, if I make a general assessment, are in the world of judiciary, the tendencies to impose more political pressure on judiciary system, on the judges, especially from the side of executive branches, so especially from the governments. We need to have absolute certainty that in each country we have independent judge who will decide on the basis of the law, not on the basis of who is who and who should be tackled how, and there is a very clear principle that we have the equality in front of or before the law, and it has to be safeguarded by the judges. So the politicization of judiciary, as well as political and economic pressures on media, which we see in many countries, the trend is worsening. We have very precise data collected in the last and this year. Media play a very important role also in, as I said before, defending democracy or giving the true picture. The professional journalists who feel high level of responsibility, of course, are the ones who should deliver objective information to the citizens, because we want the citizens to be well informed and to make their judgments and choices, especially in elections. Anti-corruption, well, we need to do more. In some member states, we see that there are sufficient and well-functioning mechanisms to fight against corruption, but in some states we don't see such picture. Also, it's reflected in the perception we hear from the citizens and businesses that in some countries the people simply do not trust that their institutions are able to fight against corruption sufficiently, and I think that this is also the factor we have to focus more.
Two countries are under Article 7 process, Hungary and Poland. Do you think they are still good working democracies?
Well, we have covered very well the problems we see, and we expressed our concerns in different papers and analysis regarding Poland and Hungary. We have the Article 7 triggered already for both countries. I never believed this article will be ever used, and we have it here. So it's important that this process is ongoing. Where we see the concrete cases of the breach of EU law, we address it by infringement procedures. And today's report is complementary to the measures and instruments I have just mentioned, because also what we heard from Poland and Hungary focus also on others. That's why we are also focusing on others. And I think that this is a very important moment when we see the situation in the member states described on the basis of objective criteria. We honestly tried to be objective in the assessment. The method we used was very transparent and inclusive. There was a cooperation from the side of the member states.
Do you see the willingness from these countries to cooperate and to change at these points that you write in the report?
We saw the willingness to cooperate from all the member states. This was a very demanding exercise. Our colleagues were assessing the reports and the findings from the discussions with, I think, 300 different bodies and from all the member states. So the willingness was there. I think by doing this work, introducing this preventive tool, which is the report we are presenting today, we are giving it more emphasis or more impetus why it is important to actively protect and defend the rule of law in the member states, and that it should be common interest. It cannot be only for the European Commission. We cannot be alone with it. So I have to say that I was well surprised, or nicely surprised, by the level and quality of cooperation. This is the first edition we are presenting today. It will be annual report, so next year we will see the trends. And what shall we do with the new findings? Well, in many cases it will be opening the door for the dialogue with respective member states.
And it's not all about Poland and Hungary. The report also highlights challenges in the justice systems of Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia and Slovakia. In Bulgaria and Malta, media outlets are tied to political forces, while in Spain, Slovenia, Bulgaria and Croatia, journalists are often threatened or attacked.
We have seen some non-usual suspects also. What are the main worries for you besides Hungary and Poland?
Well, in some states we see especially the negative trend in the world of media. It's good to read the reports where we are very open and precise in the assessment. Also the lack of action, especially investigations and prosecutions of the criminal offences in the world of finance. That's why at the same time we try to push forward the proposal to connect the rule of law principle and effective investigation and prosecution of the financial fraud. So we are now enlarging the toolbox and the number of instruments we have in hands, because speaking about the money, we are now in the situation when we are going to distribute more money. The money should serve very good purposes. Also, I have to mention the recovery money, which should help all the member states to get out of the crisis caused by COVID. And that's why we cannot keep the system where we are increasing the amount of distributed money and coping with the fact that there is this decreasing level of trust. We have to introduce some more safeguards.
We are in the middle of the budget negotiations, as you said, but is money really the only way to convince these countries to safeguard values?
Of course not. We have to deploy all the measures and instruments we have in hand. And the money, it is, I think, very, very serious warning for the states which could continue breaching the rule of law principle, that the money, by conditioning the money, because the taxpayers in member states, especially in the member states which are the net contributors, want to see more safeguards. And we must not give up the dialogue with the member states, especially with those where we have the concerns. And we simply have to admit to ourselves that we were naive in the past, that the rule of law principle is there forever, that it will work without any problems, that it is automatic, some kind of perpetuum mobile, that the fundamental rights will be always respected everywhere, that the protection of minorities will be in place everywhere. Well, it's quite clear that we have to increase the pressure on the member states to be aware that these are the holy principles of the club, because it is again about the trust. It is about the trust between the member states. For instance, that the independent courts are working everywhere with the same quality and certainty. And also this is about trust of the people in their institutions. And also here we see a gap. The trust of the people in institutions is decreasing.
Isn't it naivety to think that these countries will finally just approve this budget conditionality because they can even veto it?
The negotiations are ongoing, and I would not like to give up at this stage, or even by saying something which would put into question the importance of this proposal.
Now, this week, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán demanded your resignation because in an interview you said his regime was an ill democracy. Do you regret this wording?
No, I don't regret. What I said, I said. I said maybe hundreds of times that we have serious concerns regarding the state of play in Hungary. I used different words, but I spoke about the same thing, about the serious concerns. There was some misunderstanding also in what I said, because I remember very well the main message in the interview I gave was that the first and last word must be there for the citizens, for the Hungarian people. And I respect very much the Hungarian people and their free choice. I recognize that Prime Minister Orbán won the elections, and I just said that we need to see in all the member states, including Hungary, that there are all the conditions in place to guarantee the people the free and fair choice.
And do you think that this free and fair choice at an election is still there in Hungary?
There must be several conditions fulfilled. First of all, a level playing field in political campaign and transparency on, for instance, who is financing the campaign and how it's financed. Then the freedom of speech and well-functioning media and the judiciary oversight, because there might be a situation when the results of the elections in any country might be put into question, and then it's the moment for the courts to decide. So in case there are these conditions in place, we speak about free and fair elections.
How will you deal in the future with the Hungarian government, because they are also cutting ties with you?
I am ready for a dialogue with all the member states and all the partners.
How can the European Commission promote media pluralism in Europe?
It's a tough topic, I have to say, because we do not have very strong legal competences. We have some. So, for instance, now on the 20th of September, the audiovisual directive came into force, and we will look into how the member states are implementing it in their national legislation and especially in the practice. Up to now, only several member states have notified the implementation. So we will look into that and using our legal competence. But for the rest, we have not strong enough legal competences. And we have, I think, several times recommended the member states to protect or to help the media now in COVID time to survive economically. And there were several member states which are now applying the state aid on media as well to help them to keep the jobs and so on. So there are different ways, and I believe that we will be well understood in trying to support independent media because they are heavily needed.
With the pandemic, European countries rushed to apply emergency laws that limited civil liberties and the free movement of citizens. Parallel to that, a new wave of fake news and disinformation flooded the internet, with the blame being laid on Russia and China in many cases.
Do you think after the COVID pandemics we will be able to go back to a kind of old normality in terms of democracy?
In many ways, old normal was not good normal. We already had problems before COVID, as we know. COVID time required the launching of the emergency regimes in majority member states. So we tried hard to convince the member states to respect the principle of necessity and proportionality for the measures. Because emergency regime must not mean that you switch off the constitutional balance and you switch off the judiciary oversight, or you silence the media, or you silence the active citizens. So on this COVID time and the cases of emergency regimes, we were very clear on how we would like to see this happening. Also, by the way, the protection of privacy was at stake. And we delivered the guidelines for the member states how to use the tracing apps without overdoing that and without depriving the people of privacy. And I think that this is the lesson for the future. You asked about new and old normal. Well, this is a never-ending process. As I told you, we used to be naive. We thought that it is automatism. It's not. So we will continue the active defense of rule of law and democracy in Europe. I would like to say that we should stop just declaring it. We have to go and do it. More defense, more protection.
The pandemic brought also a huge wave of fake news. Do you have tools to fight it, or it will stay with us?
It's one of the factors on which I can quite well describe how the old situation before COVID was amplified in COVID time. We already before COVID had a big issue in foreign influence through the disinformation campaigns. We had several sectors under permanent attack of disinformation, minorities, migration, now newly the green policies. New thing is the big and intensive disinformation wave against vaccination. So this is not new. This phenomenon of disinformation has to be tackled, but in a very careful and wise way. And I can only tell you that we are planning some new rules for online world, but on disinformation we are not introducing any kind of censorship or some kind of limitation to freedom of speech.
How do you deal with foreign disinformation attempts, especially from China and Russia?
Our External Action Service is actively working in detecting these coordinated attacks and attempts to influence the public opinion in the EU. We are working with the internet platforms because we want them to inform the public about these cases so that the people know that this is the pressure from outside. And also we want the people to understand better what's the purpose of this pressure. What's the purpose of different disinformation campaigns that probably me as a citizen, I am under the influence of somebody who really wants to distract our society and who want to sow hatred and distrust to institutions. I think that we have a big gap in making it clear what is the purpose of the disinformation and that it can be very dangerous.
Now Europe's relations with Russia suffered a new blow with the Navalny case. Do you think Europe should put sanctions on Russia because of this issue?
Well, I think that the debate is ongoing in the External Action Service and also in the External Council. This is indeed a big blow, and we cannot leave it without reaction. I'm absolutely sure that this is one of the game changers also in our relations.
Do you think there could be unity on this issue in Europe?
We need unity for the sanctions.
Vera Jourova, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much.